Welcome back. We're on part 2 of this project. So you had seen in the previous video we had gotten off the old siding and we installed all of our different furring strips out of this pressure treated plywood to bring the concrete surface that the lap siding will install on flush with the rest of the home. I've continued that around this window opening and then had taken out the old window like you had seen in the previous segment. Now I'm at the point that I'm going to be rebuilding this box frame for the new size of the new window that I've got. As you had seen, I had scraped off all the sealant, the old glue, the old caulking, and now I've got a good surface to start from. This concrete rough opening is about 43 1/4 wide by about 31 inches tall. My window that I'm going to be installing is 40 3/4 wide by 28 3/8 tall. So I've got about 2.5, 2 5/8 inches to work with on the sides and on the top. But I don't really want to build up that much with spray foam. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be actually shrinking that opening size by doubling up some plywood on the bottoms, top, and sides. This plywood's 1/2 inch, it's pressure treated. And if I double it up, I'm going to be reclaiming about 2 inches of that concrete opening to give me a new rough opening that's within 1/2 inch or 5/8 of what the actual window size is. And that's well within the size I like to give me the wiggle room as well as some shim space and insulation around the window. My plan to do this is I'm going to be putting in some structural adhesive along the surfaces. I'm going to be putting these plywood pieces in. I may laminate them first with some pressure or with some adhesive and maybe some short screws or something just to laminate them into a single board. And then I'll be using silicone around all the seams just to give myself a little bit more water sealant. My thought is that for the width, I'm going to bring this sill, this new sill that I'm going to be creating, this box frame, out so that it's flush with this front surface so that I get the same front surface here as what the windows up in the top floor will be using. That way, when this is all said and done, everything should be at the proper depth at the exterior. And on the inside, we'll probably have to create some kind of custom extension jamb just to bring it out to the new surface because there'll eventually be a finished bedroom down here. All that to say, I think I've got a plan to go forward with. Let's see how it turns out. So at least this part of the casing is all done. We've got that placed on the bottom, top, and sides, bringing in our finished rough opening closer to what that window size is actually going to be. I'm going to treat just this little portion of wall as if it was part of the main wall system with the wood above. I'm actually going to use some of my Tamlin wrap. I'm going to wrap this opening, and I'm going to treat it just as I do any of the other windows. And the reason for that is that if there is any water that comes behind my lap siding, that's the reason for that Tamlin wrap, I want to have a continuous piece here that the next piece can rain over top of and hopefully bypass any of this window system sealing that I'm going to do. So let me get that up real quick, and then we'll get into the actual window install and sealing up with the caulking. Well, guys, it's the next day here. It ended up getting late. You know, I'm kind of getting used to the shorter days, the working days, with it's getting further into fall. So I ended up having to get this window in and kind of buttoned up a little bit in a rush. So I apologize for not having some video of it. But I wanted to talk about what I had done. We have this window in place now. What we did is we ended up putting a bead of caulk all around the outside perimeter as we brought it into place. After that, then I built up, I put in a couple of different layers of the flashing tape. We have our first flashing tape, which is kind of the silver that's kind of visible underneath the tamlin wrap. And that was one where we start on the bottom, then we overlap with our side pieces, and then we overlap again with the top. And that was the first set of flashing tape, which brought the window up against our pressure treated plywood. Once that was done, then I kind of overlapped my tamlin wrap over that tape and then left enough of the flashing or the window exposed so that I could get my final piece of flashing tape to hold the tamlin wrap up against that. And essentially all we're doing is we're creating multiple layers that the water has to work through if it were to try to penetrate the seal. Just like we've done on our other windows, we leave the top tamlin wrap untapped or untaped. That allows water to kind of come in and drain over rather than get trapped behind the window. So all in all, I kind of like the look of this window. It's brought out to the new depth that matches our upstairs windows, which I'll be replacing here shortly. But that'll be the depth that I was kind of looking for. Here we are at the inside of the window, just giving a quick overview of how the installed window actually went in. I didn't want to use the nailing flange of the window on the exterior because I had only about 1 inch of material on those fir strips to install the window against this concrete, and I didn't think that was going to be sufficient. So what I ended up doing was buying some of these structural brackets. They're galvanized steel nailing patterns that you can get in any of our hardware stores. This one was a 3x5. And what I've got is some 1-inch screws going into the frame this way. Again, I've got some on top, bottoms, and sides. And then I had 1-inch screws going into my pressure-treated plywood on that side. I had to use some of this caulking or this foam rope around the exterior perimeter before I did the caulking so that the caulk didn't just squeeze all the way through. But that's all sealed in. We had it taped in like I showed from the outside. And I'm pretty pleased with how this turned out on the inside. Now, when we go to finish this room, on the interior someday in the future, we'll be putting some 2x material in along with some pink foam sheets to kind of insulate this room. And what that'll do is that'll actually make this whole window look a little bit deeper. And so my extension jamb is going to come in and probably extend another 2 inches or so, 1.5 inches or 2 inches further past where this concrete is now. And then we'll go in and spray foam or pack some fiberglass insulation all the way around this frame. One of the things that I didn't plan for, but that worked out in my favor, is that we had a rainstorm last night that was pretty heavy. And actually, it was a good way of me testing or checking how well the install went and making sure I didn't have any water runs or anything before I start buttoning things up too permanently on the outside with my lap siding. So sometimes nature will work out in your favor. Well, guys, we're looking at the inside of the next window to do. This is a pretty plain Jane window. It's a single casement, so it should be pretty easy to pop out. I'm not going to be saving any of this trim that goes around here. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to score along the edge so I don't mess up my drywall. Make sure that the paint doesn't peel up as I pull the trim off. Then I'm just going to pop this off to kind of free the inside. This lower sill portion I may have to break apart. I can't recall if that's integral to the window or not. But we're going to do our best to save this window. It's a decent one, and I think they can make use of it at a home remodeling reuse store, like Restore or something like that. Anyway, so that'll be our step. We'll get this out. Then we'll work from the outside and start getting the flange out on the other side so that the whole window should be able to kind of just come out. This one's about 60 inches tall by 24 wide, and we'll be replacing it with a 24 wide by 48 inch tall. So we're going to bring up the bottom portion of this so that the new window height fits a little bit taller. So as we're working on this window, the trim comes off pretty easily. It looked like there were just some 16 or 18 gauge brad nails holding the trim around the outside of the frame. So that comes off pretty easy. Like I said, I want to try to keep this frame or this whole window intact so that the next guy can use it. As I mentioned, it's not quite the thing that we wanted for our project, but it doesn't mean it's not a good window, just we're looking for a different size. So with the trim out, I got to get this extension jamb off. From what I can tell, it's kind of wiggling together with the extension jamb, this sill is. So I imagine it's all kind of a pre-assembled portion, pre-assembled piece, and then we'll just take this out. What it looked like is that there's some of these small trim head screws securing it in there. These are just some of the little Torx type. So what I've got is a T10 driver on here. It's a pretty tiny one. We'll just come up and take them out this way. So I'm just going to work my way around the whole window and doing this thing. It should pop out pretty easily. Alright, that went pretty well. So we've got the casement, the extension jamb, pulled out as a single unit, kind of like what I had suspected. It was held in with maybe 15 of those screws. And then there may have even been a little bit of adhesive, some kind of wood glue holding it in this tongue and groove. So anyways, this window is now free from the inside to come out. There's nothing going to hold it up. And now I just got to work from the outside. So we're at the outside of that window now. Starting to take out the nails along the flange. The sun's just coming over the trees, so it's starting to get a little warm here. But I wanted to show you what the previous installer had done. Not that it's wrong, but it's not necessarily how I would have done it. Instead of putting any of the nails in the top flange, what they had is they had this extra piece of tin that they kind of folded over and nailed through that instead. No tape or anything at the top. And then what it looked like they did is along this whole edge, I haven't gotten to the right side yet, but the whole left edge, instead of going through these pre-marked holes, it looks like they just punched it right through the plastic. In some of the places, it's pretty close to the actual framing, so a little surprised by that. What I'm doing is I just scored this tape, this flashing tape. I've got my flat blade behind it, just kind of working it down along the edge until I find where a nail is, and then I can pry that nail and pop it through the tape. So that's how things are going out here. At the bottom, very similar. You know, they taped this one, not with that tin like it was on the top side, but just normal flashing tape and a few nails kind of through it. What I'm seeing behind it is that because this is a remodeled window, or it was done since the original home was built, they already had to do some of this fill-in material, like what I've had to do on my other windows. So I'll be interested to see what they got here, and if it's sound enough that I can reuse it, or if I'll be more comfortable doing my own. So I'm going to work down the right side of this window. I can't promise that I'm going to film this while I'm doing it, just because it's a little difficult to manage at the top of the ladder this way. But I'll get this window out and we'll see what it looks like. All right, only about a half an hour's worth of work and that window comes out. It looks like what they had done to shim in around the window looks pretty clean, looks like good wood still. So I'm going to reuse that, except like I said, I'm going to build the floor up a little bit so that it matches the new height of the window up here. Just to do what I've been doing with the other windows, I'm going to extend my Tamlin wrap over front of the hole. I'll probably leave it long so that I can get to the second window later. And I'm going to do 2 layers to build myself up to where the tieback is up above. And that way I can wrap the frame with the Tamlin wrap, get everything waterproofed a little bit better. I'm going to leave, you know, that tar and tin flashing tape in place. I don't think it'll hurt anything. It's pretty adhered to the siding, so we'll just leave that and just use the Tamlin wrap over top of it. Now I know I've said this probably before on some of the other videos that we've done with other windows and things, but what we do with these windows is that once we get them in place and make sure they're all plumb and in position with approximately the same gap on the left and right side, we go ahead and nail the nailing flange in the holes that are already provided. There's no need to go punching your own holes unless you're running into a problem where you just don't have the right structure behind it, the right type of framing. Once it's all held in place, then I actually go in with some of this flashing tape and I do the sides first, leaving it long to extend down below the bottom as well as up to the top a little bit. I've got my Tamlin wrap or the house wrap kind of held up over top of that top flange so that the top flange of the window slides up behind the wrap. Once that's done, then we nail that all in, and then we put tape overlapping the two sides. And what that does, we don't ever tape the bottom, but what that does is it gives a layered effect between your house wrap, which is over top of your tape, which is on top of the flange, and then the top tape that's overlapping your side tape. All that's done is just so that you have kind of a shingled or layered effect so that if any water does get in at the top, it can work its way out instead of being trapped in. Especially the case on the bottom. It looks a little odd leaving the nailing flange open like that, untaped. But in this case where you've got an actual 2x4 wall structure behind it with my blue finished or now sheathing, you want to be able to have some path for water or moisture that gets in there to drain out below. So it's pretty straightforward. This was a relatively easy window just because it's small. It's smaller than the one we took out of it. So it went pretty well and I'm happy with how it looks. Well guys, thanks for tuning in and following along with this. We did the 3 windows on the south wall in about 3 days, give or take. You know, if you had full days to work on these kind of projects, you'd probably get it knocked out in a day or day and a half. As you've probably seen though, or probably noticed, there's a lot more preparation than actually goes into it than the actual window install portion. Especially with these new construction ones with the nailing flange, those go awfully quick and taping them up is a cinch. So really the majority of my time is spent just kind of prepping the wall and getting things ready for that point. Now that we've got these 3 windows in, I think we'll be doing some trim work in our next video series, our next video. We've got trim around the windows to do. I've got some blocking that I want to do so that now my gutters have a place to install. And then we'll be moving on to the siding. So I appreciate you guys following along. If you learned anything, give us a thumbs up. If you disliked anything, or if you had any questions, leave them down in the comments. I'd be happy to hear from you. Thanks guys. We'll see you on the next one. Take care.